We have a special episode today. I think for those in the industry, commercial real estate brokerage companies are, we're well known. There's no mystery as to what we do, but I don't know if I've ever really seen someone go behind the scenes and not just talk about what we do, but more so how we did it. And so for this episode, there's no three better people to have with me to kind of walk through the history of Matthews, the how. Than these three gentlemen. David Harrington, our president, El Presidente, Chief Operating Officer Dirk Brewer, and our fearless CFO, so Chief Financial and Strategy Officer, Ratty Zlatkoff. Let's give a round of applause.
Yay!
To ourselves.
Yay me. Let's have a discussion about who we are and how we're different and why all that matters. And, to me, this just goes back to the very beginning. And Kyle, let's kick it off with you. Why don't you tell us how Matthews even got started?
Yeah, I mean, I've told this story before. I'll kind of cliff note it. You could probably find a longer version of this story somewhere. But I just felt there was an opportunity in the space in commercial real estate brokerage to do something. I said at the time, do something better than it had ever been done before, but really different. And there's a lot of little differences, we could touch on. You guys know what those are. I mean, some of which the opportunity was real and we do them to this day. Other parts where, we thought we could do something, then, it was like, actually, you know what? It makes more sense to do it the way it has been done. But it was just the opportunity that I saw in the space where I just, in my young self-confidence, ignorance is bliss way, said, oh yeah, we could do this and we could do it way better than any company that I've been at was doing it. And that was the why. It was real simple. This was not an incredibly detailed, well thought out, this has been my life goal. It just, an opportunity presented itself from a timing perspective in early 2015. The company I was at, this was going public and they were starting to shift all these little policies around, and that would have an impact. But I think mentally I was already there. Ratty, we were already talking, months before, about one day, hey, I think we'll start a company. And
conceptually there would be something.
Yeah, an opportunity to start a company down the road, and everything was accelerated because the company I was at, like I said, going public, things started shifting. And so I just made the leap. It was April 2015. And I think you joined 60 days later, you 6 months later, Dirk a couple years later, and it was just off to the races.
Well, you had gone through your own brokerage business, this brand building exercise. And so you had a great brand in the marketplace already. And of course, one of the things I recognized with my background being multifamily brokerage, and you had taken this notion of specialization in commercial real estate, which had existed, but you created more of a hyper specialization early on, really with single tenant net lease retail and what you were doing there, because you did a lot of multi-tenant.
I did multi-tenant. I was doing shopping centers around the country, and most of my business at that point had really morphed in less geographic based, more account based. So, the top 20 publicly traded REITs, private equity platforms would hire me to take out a lot of non-core assets. And then, I had teammates, kind of part of my purview who were doing a lot of net lease. So we did do that. But getting back to the why, for me, and again, there's so many things we could double click into, but the biggest difference that I thought could exist at Matthews as opposed to some of the companies I had experienced, and look, I was talking to you every day, you had experienced at a couple companies you were at, was, it's a lot of people, you hear them say work smarter, not harder. And absolutely everyone should aspire, and we do every day. I was just geeking out with the coders over there, dude, the quants. Those guys are wild. And I was just like, what is that? They were coding, and I was like, man, that's amazing. That looks cool. I don't know what it is, but it looks amazing. But and it's always like, okay, work smarter, no doubt. But I looked at Matthews as like, well, why can't we do both? I call it the synergy of the and instead of the tyranny of the or. I'm just joking. That's Ratty's line. But no, but it's just like, why is it we either have to work really smart, or we have to work really hard? And me and my teammates and early Matthews was known for hard work, kind of coming into the founding of Matthews formally as a company. But I saw such an opportunity in the technology space. I mean, real estate, commercial real estate, I don't mean to offend anyone. I guess I'd be offending myself here. our industry, I always say to call it late adopting is offensive to late adopters. Like commercial real estate, especially in 2015, was non-adopting of new technologies. And I think you even see it today in AI space. We're 3.5 years into AI as we know it. And I would argue 99.99% of the business, nothing has changed. And it really is a testament to how adverse to change commercial real estate is. And so founding Matthews, I said, my belief, and you shared this with me, and eventually you joined and shared, was that we could do both. That we could be really great at technology and efficiency and innovation, and marry that or couple that with maniacal commitment to effort, which is work ethic. And I always, the pun on the real estate pun is Matthew sits at the hard corner of innovation, and we call it culture, but work ethic.
Hey, Kyle, I got a question. So when I joined, you had already started down the path of leveraging a shared database and a concept of a shared services platform, which were both things that I had some experience with and was part of my attraction to joining because I saw that as a big opportunity. But at what point did you decide that was going to be a part of the framework that you were operating here? Because it's obviously very different than the other firms you were at.
Yeah, I would love to take credit for some unique idea. It was just an evolution of what I was doing on my team. I had a traditional brokerage team. So, but where I was at, there was no shared database, as you know. And again, at almost any company, there's no shared database across the company, shared information, shared data, shared anything. But within teams, there might be. So for me, I was, a senior broker. Then I had some young people coming up underneath me. And when they started with me, I just was like, hey, just plug into my database and just use this. And that actually is very common in the industry. But what my team eventually kind of evolved into a company, I mean, literally, the first 5 or 10, I probably didn't give any thought of. And I remember, I don't remember exactly when, but I remember thinking like, okay, we got 30, 40 people. Yeah, let's just all use one database. And that's when it was like, well, can this be done? And my quick answer was yes. And some of that gets to how it's actually built from a technology standpoint, from how it's coded, to the culture of the company. But it wasn't easy, but it was easier when you start a company where your culture and what people are used to is a blank slate. It's all they ever know. And they're able to really embrace the value of sharing that type of information, initially across an office and now across the country. So it wasn't a vision of mine. It was just something that happened organically. And again, for everything that happened organically, like the shared database, there's 5 things that happen organically that somewhere along the way we're like, okay, this doesn't work anymore, with scale or for whatever reason. But that was one that right away we saw the value, and it was part of our initial pitch early on. And it just, the value of that, it just continues to grow by the day, even to this day.
The first iteration of that was when I came over and brought my team from having an established track record with contacts with owners all over the place, and then really integrating all of that in with the retail side of the business that you had already built out. And so now we had this other different product type that is related in a way, because you remember back at that time, and we talked about it, there were so many multifamily owners that were sick of management, wanted to do an exchange into a net lease product, and we made that a much more seamless way to execute that entire transition based on having this shared information. Because the old silo broker model is, hey, I'm an apartment broker, I have my database of however many thousand contacts, I don't know what else they own. I know they own this apartment building here in this area, that's it. Maybe they own a few more. But do they own single-tenant net lease retail? I don't know, but now I know.
Around that time, it still is, but around that time, it was a thing that, and we were in Southern California, just to give context to the viewer, that Southern California multifamily owner, kind of hitting that boomer stage of retirement, looking to continue cash flow, ideally increase, but simplify their life, especially on the management side. The 1031 into the triple net, that was a real thing. And again, it still happens to this day, but it was big back then. And that was the ultimate marriage between your business and mine. And I remember the first time, and again, this, getting back to your question, I didn't see this coming. It just kind of like, I don't know if it's blind luck, but right place, right time. I'm thinking, well, Dave can bring his multifamily business, which was very robust and married with kind of the net lease business that we had been building. And, there's good capital flows there, which again, that's real. But I remember the first time that one of our new multifamily agents that had come over with Dave called an owner on multifamily, but in the database, they could see that they already owned 3 triple net properties. And they called on the multifamily building, and the owner's like, look, I have no interest in selling those. And they go, well, what about those 3 triple net properties? And they're like, yeah, actually one of them, I'm having, some issues with a tenant. I can't remember the motivation. And they say, great, let me grab my teammate, like, hey, Bill, bring Bill over because he's the specialist on CVS. And all of a sudden they did this deal and that was like an aha lights on moment for me. You're like, oh my gosh, providing brokers access to as much of an owner profile, even above and beyond your product type, it's so valuable to them in generating leads and business and revenue, let alone to the clients, providing them great service and great information. So let me ask you guys, I mean, we've talked about the founding, and I take no offense, all right? But what was it, and so, I don't know if I've ever asked you this question, like literally, but like what was it that caused you to join Matthews? And I'll start with you, Ratty, because you were the first.
Okay. Well, look, in my career, I had had opportunities in public companies. So, meaning traded on NYC, various stock exchanges. Wonderful background in that. And then I had gone private with a really wonderful company that eventually went public a couple years ago. But I saw the difference between them, right? And there is a distinct difference. It's not the podcast to sort of litigate that, but there is a long-term thinking. It's just different. And I really enjoyed that. And so the next step in the Benjamin Button of my career, smaller companies, the biggest was the first. I really was looking for a true startup. I was at Keurig when it was already public and it was a scaling company. It was, $500 million to $5 billion. While I was there, and incredible experience, incredible people. I was ready for something new, and which was a true startup. And professional services
Be careful what you wish for, right?
Professional services is a part, CFO and strategy, and so it's a different perspective for me. When you look at our economy, I mean, it's a service-based economy, right? Professional services are key to the way that the country operates, to our GDP, to our economy. And so, look, I have a fascination with businesses. This was an opportunity to do that. But all that is all secondary. And I'll tell you why, guys. And really, it's not a joke, but when I look at some of the best investors, and I was just listening to somebody talk about their investment in XAI and Elon, that's all really nice to have. He's an incredible founder. It's AI, but it's really about the person. So to me, my vote was on Kyle, and looks like I bet correctly so far. So,
well, that's very
no,
kind.
truly,
It's worth also acknowledging. So Ratty and I have been close friends since we were 14, 15 years old. We had both moved to a new high school. You were a year or two ahead of me. I had moved from Georgia, and we met on the football field and had a great relationship. Ended up becoming roommates at USC. And we had talked about MZ development. Like we're going to start a real estate company one day.
it was actually in the shared database as such, and I would get mailers from there.
That's right. And so part of it was when I was founding the company, and I looked at myself as like a sales revenue guy. Like I'm going to focus on the deals. It's like, well, who's going to the finance, the operations, all of it? And I was like, well, I know a guy, and we've talked about this going back. I don't know at the time. I mean, that was over a decade. And I called. Your now wife was pretty pissed at me for a year or two because you had a wonderful life in Boston. I said, hey, move out to LA, where she didn't.
I took the call to Chestnut Hill Fountain at the mall there. We were at a dinner. I walked out at the dinner, took the phone call from you. I went back to the table, and I know more now in life as I've grown older.
I know where you're going.
But I said, Ashley, we're moving to Los Angeles. This is incredible.
This was the first time she.
Yes. So this is the first time she had ever heard of that. But it was, in all honesty, that is exactly what happened. Yeah. And it was like that for me. But to your point, I think you're right. It happens at a snap when you take a lifetime before that, right? When you've grown together, you know each other, you've had separate careers in separate geographic places, Los Angeles, Boston, different industries. And so you've kept in touch, you've kept the friendship going. So yeah, there's a lot in that snap moment, that snap judgment. But at the end of the day, you have to make that as an individual. You have to make that for your family, your future family. And there it is. But yeah, all jokes aside, there was something in the way that Kyle said that this is what we're going to build. And I won't put a number on it, but it was a big number. Okay,
Yeah, it was a really big-
it was a really big number.
$1
But
billion.
it was not about the number. It was about you could
right.
hear it in the man's voice.
Well, all right. So the first 3 months, Ratty was at the company. You stayed at my house, right? Like,
Oh,
that was great.
forget about that.
Yeah.
So what happened, right? So let's talk about what happened. We moonlighted a little bit. I'm sorry to my last employer, but it really was a night.
Yeah.
We would be on early days of shared experience. I don't even know what that is. Did we have a WebEx or something?
I don't know.
Kyle was showing me the technology. So I was getting real time from the founder. Here's our database. Here's our technology. Here's how we do what we do. And here's what's special about this. So every day I got more and more excited. But yeah, at some point it was like, okay, now it's time to move. And just given all the circumstances, my wife also had a career in Boston. Literally got in the car. My father flew out. We drove across the country. My family lived in LA at the time. And yes, I lived in Kyle's spare bedroom in the basement level.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to tell a story. I've never told this story.
Oh, no.
All right. No. It's all right. You're good. You're good. I've mentioned to the audience is that, we've bootstrapped Matthews. There's no investors, there's no debt, self-funded, the whole thing. And all that's true. And I was personally coming off some good years in brokerage, and that's what allowed the company to get going. But as part of my exit from the company I was at, there was, I think it was like 127 deals were either listed or under contract. So it was this massive deal pipeline, and we had it was super amicable. I was talking to the regional manager, the local manager, the president. We were all working through it. Everything was good. But there's this massive revenue, like millions of dollars of revenue that was under contract, listed, going to be under contract closing. And part of the deal was it will all close it as it should. And then whatever my percentage of the fee would be, and the guys on my team, they'd send that over. So it was all good. Something happened where, like, the left hand wasn't talking to the right hand, and the local, kind of regional team was like, yeah, that works. But then corporate didn't get the message. So I start Matthews, whatever that was, April 24th, 2015. There's $1.5 million in the bank, in the corporate account. And it just starts going like this, because the company I was at, I'll beep out the name, they weren't forwarding the money. And they were going public. There was so much craziness going on. And frankly, the C-suite, they needed an answer from them to sign off on this deal, and they didn't care. There was like some guy out in LA. And for about 2 months, 2.5 months, from mid-April to the end of June, I've never told the story, they didn't forward a single dollar. And the bank account was like, and I was sweating it, dude. And I left that detail out to Ratty. I was like, oh, dude, we have this, here's our pipeline, here's the revenue. He shows up, his first day of work was like the day after July 4th, I think.
Yeah, right.
It was like, whatever that, the 6th or 7th, the first work day. And I give him the login to the Wells Fargo, and it was $42,000 in the company account. That's a real story, $42,000. And I was working with attorneys. We started sending letters like, hey, this is the agreement. You signed off on it. And there was like $2 million that had been stacked up. And I think like January 8th, they sent the wire, and we were, the rest is history.
July 8th, yeah.
Sorry, July 8th. They sent January 8th, we'd be out of business.
Yeah.
But it felt like, I'm sure I would have capital called the business, but it was like, I was down, I was like, are we going to make payroll this Friday? Like, because they're saying they're going to send the money. And finally they wired, whatever it was, over $2 million of fee, that maybe more, that we had been accruing. And we were so stressed. Like, oh my God, because Ratty's like, you said there's a lot more money. I was like, well, there will be, just trust me.
It's coming.
Yeah, it's coming.
It's just AR.
Yeah, the things that happen when you start companies, you're like, yeah, it'll be fine. You'll figure it out, And now when you have a bigger company, everything is, there's a vision that becomes a strategy, that becomes a plan, that becomes like KPI driven execution. It's very structured. But when you found a company, there's no structure. And Ratty came in and provided structure. He certainly financial structure, okay, sending wires, payrolls, insurance, all these things that I just wasn't doing. And then on the operations side, the original operations guy, like structure to the marketing team, and I was out there, I was explaining, I was talking to some of the guys who work on the deduping. I was like, I did that job, but as for Ratty, the first couple years, like, kind of, like, you just do every job, and then this Yahoo joined about 6 months later.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll jump in and tell you that story. So obviously you mentioned it a moment ago, but we were talking all of the time. I was in your office. I was a part of those meetings when you were getting ready to launch the company. And so that was fun to observe. And a lot of what you had done prior to that was driving my own brokerage business and the building that I was doing and where I was and bringing people on and being in different areas and just a lot of hooks in the water at different places. So we had this discussion, and it took some time, as you remember. And it was a very thoughtful process for me.
This is like one of my closest friends, and I had 2.5 years of recruiting. I still couldn't get him. Like the worst recruiter ever. I could not get him to sign up.
It wasn't that long. Well, look, there was a very real thought process that went through because I needed to really assess. We were best friends. So
I get it. You're not a decisive guy. I get it. You don't have to explain it. Anyone watching can piece that together.
Yeah. Okay. So
It took me in the soup plantation, if you recall.
Yeah. Well, if you
Fancy restaurant in the
you might also recall that a decision was made, and I did end up at Matthews, and then you go to the question of like, why would I do that? So I had a lot of opportunity.
He still asks himself that question every day.
Well, I had a lot of opportunity in my life at that time, and that was keep chopping wood and building where I was, which was a good opportunity. It was a good foundation.
And you were offered that CEO gig at the Westside Rentals.
Well, there was an opportunity there, and they were subsequently acquired by another big behemoth. But ultimately, the real decision was one that came down to opportunity, right? That's what we're all seeking in life, is opportunity and making a decision to seize the right one. And through a lot of, because you see in real estate, if you've been in the industry, particularly in the brokerage side, you see partnerships, families that are complete disasters. Like at one point, they were very close, very tight, best friends in the world, you name it. Now they are mortal enemies, and they are horrible. And I didn't envision that for us, and that has not happened, by the way.
Not yet.
Not yet. Give it time. But I actually used that story about how we came together and the thought process and the risks associated with it when I'm talking to agents at other companies, and I say, let me give you a glimpse as to who we are today. That's a part of that story, because we've come in and we took a very, I'll speak for myself. My ego is as big as this office building, but it is also something that I can put aside for the greater good of let's go get after it. And I am happy to, participate in this building exercise, because going back to the opportunity, I saw very clearly what it was from what you had laid out and all the business that you were doing. But it all centered really down to culture. And we talk about, who we are today, culture being the thing that we talk about the most. It is the hardest to perhaps define for someone who's watching, listening to this, but it was culture, because you remember all those guys I had with me? Yeah. There was an immediate uplift, and I knew that there would be, because at those other places, like where I was, I had a nice culture. The other opportunities, it didn't really exist. And so it had to be manufactured
from scratch.
But for you had this amazing culture of people that were tied in together that really subscribed to this philosophy that I have to wake up before my competition, that I have to outwork my competition, that this is possible and available to you, but you have to work to achieve it. And let's now go and give the support and the life in the air to that so it can come together and be real. And so that's what I saw. And we saw that work right away when the people come in and immediately they're plugged into this different culture. And it worked for me too, by the way, to where they're able to have a different energy that they can tap into that helps drive ultimately their productivity.
Yeah, it was a great fit, and I kind of knew that because like you and I have known each other going back since I started in the business, and obviously professionally and personally very close. But I think in many ways that fit of the guys you brought over and you was even better than I anticipated, and I had very high expectations, and I knew it was going to be good when you guys closed your first deal at Matthews, first apartment deal we ever closed, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
I didn't talk to Dave about this. He didn't consult with me, say, hey, what do you think? He Dave being Dave. So to celebrate, Dave paid to have a mariachi band come in and play for the day during the they were supposed to play for like an hour. It was like 10 minutes. Guys were dying, and then it was so loud. They're like, hey, I got to get back on these
The
phones.
sound was deafening
Yeah.
because we had the concrete ceilings.
Oh, all right. So let me tell you about the first office. So,
The casino.
I had the casino. No windows,
I see.
no clocks,
We're pumping in oxygen.
pumping in oxygen to keep the guys, no. You have to move quick, even though working with the company I was at, it was all good. It had to be done quick. So you take kind of whatever office space, not only you can get, but you can afford. You're starting a new company. I didn't raise capital. And so we took this ground floor space that only on one side had windows, but all those windows were in private offices, and the private offices had wooden doors. So like legitimately no sunlight would come in. And the sunlight that did come in outside those windows faced like a 15-story parking garage. This is a true story, 20 feet away. So I mean, it was like a dungeon. And I didn't know any better. Now we have all these beautiful Class A offices. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, man.
And in 8,000 square feet at our peak, we had 120 people.
120 people, yeah. Fire marshal. I remember the fire marshal came in. He's like, guys, come on. I was like, no. These are just interns. They're going to be leaving soon. He's like, all right, I'm going to come back in a couple months and check. And luckily he didn't come back.
One small set of bathrooms.
One small set of bathrooms, only 2 stalls, a lot of dudes on our side. And then we shared it with a DaVita call center on the other side. Yeah, it was.
So both had about 120 people.
It's all first world, but it was an interesting experience. Eventually people figured out some of the restaurants in the area were kind of let you use the restroom, but I lived 2 minutes away. If I had to, I'd just drive home, but it was that bad. But no, it was fun. It was fun, and there's so many people still at the company from those formative years in El Segundo, in the dungeon, the casino, and at the time, again, we probably didn't know any better, but now we get together a lot, a lot of events, a lot of celebratory trips when I'm traveling for work, and all we do is sit around talking about the good old days in El Segundo, where guys were working 14, 15 hours a day, making 500 calls, just getting their teeth kicked in on the phones, pitching 10 deals to win one, like more failure than you'd expect to experience in a lifetime. You'd experience in a year at Matthews at the time, but absence makes the heart grow fond. You look back, you're like, man, that was so special.
And you had to start in the storage room.
Yeah, so
eventually,
we
ran out of
you
space.
started in the storage room, and if you're lucky enough, you move to a call station. I mean,
And then it all felt much better after that.
yeah, we were savages back then. And then I met you at NMAC. We actually just came back from there. I met you at NMAC in Orlando. You introduced me, and then you and I ended up having a conversation a year later.
Yeah.
What was it about Matthews that, I mean, you touched on some of it earlier, but were you like, I may have to really explore this thing? Because you had a good setup.
Yeah, I did. I mean, for me, I started in the industry at a founder-led brokerage company that had a vision, was kind of moving forward toward that. I got really excited about it. I always say I Forrest Gumped my way into the industry. It was supposed to be a summer job and ended up being at that company plus it's the company that acquired it after for almost 17 years. And I'd made a partner in that company really working on some of the core concepts of like using a shared database, but it was exclusive just to multifamily. And also being really involved in building the technology platform on top of that and the shared services. And so I really believed in those concepts, and I saw the successful business we were able to build with that, but it was just limited to this one little niche of the business in multifamily. And so when I ultimately decided it was time for me to move on and go build something somewhere else after the acquisition happened of that company, I was looking for those kind of foundational pieces first and foremost, because
magic.
Well, it was just something that I really believed in as a better way to run the business and scale it. And I've been a part of building that, but I felt like there was so much more to do. But the founder coming out of the GFC, I just don't think he had the appetite to keep building it anymore. After we rebuilt to a stabilized organization, I think he was ready to exit. And without that kind of centralized vision there anymore from the founder, it just kind of eroded, and we really weren't progressing toward anything anymore. We were just, kind of treading water is the way it felt to me. And to me, treading water, the phrase I used, I remember when I met with my boss there, I said, I feel like I'm dying a little bit inside every day I go to work. And so that's why I left there, went to another firm and was building. Like I said, I had a good thing going. We were building another company. We were scaling it. But after I met with you, and I knew Dave because we had worked together. I've known him for almost 20 years. And, he introduced me to you. We just talked briefly that first time, but a year later, I really had an opportunity to hear more about what you were doing. And suddenly the idea of taking some of those concepts and doing it across the entire industry, across all product types, some of the things you guys talked about, the synergy between, net lease and multifamily and all the other asset classes we've now added and other business lines, leasing, debt, and that bigger vision, that opportunity to do that and build it on top of some of these same concepts that I very much believed in got me really excited. But at the end of the day, there was really kind of two things that tipped it for me. And one of them is exactly what Ratty said, is about people. And you and I had a follow-up meeting, and you did not take me to the El Segundo office wisely first.
By then we had an Orange County office, and it was in a Class
beautiful.
A building.
Oh,
It was
that's right.
real
It was a
pretty. I
beautiful
was like,
office.
oh yeah, let's just go to Orange County.
He teed it up with a good call contest going right while I was
Oh,
there.
I activated the space.
It looked
Space
like
was
it looked like
activated.
it looked like I was walking into the Wall Street trading floor. I mean, these guys were just ripping, which it's like that in any
I
of
was
our
gonna say,
offices
it's like that
anyway.
most of the time.
But it was rabid at that moment, and I was blown away because I had never seen anything like it. And at that point, I'd been in the industry. I mean, I'd been in almost 20 years at that point.
But you were out in Orange County with your family visiting Disneyland.
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, let's meet at the office.
Yeah. So I packed a suit with me just in case. I wasn't really sure. I wasn't sure about this thing because I'm a very loyal person and I was focused where I was, but I brought a suit just in case I decided to do it. And so I pinged you kind of while I was in town. You said, yeah, let's do it. And so you met me over there, but it was beautiful and I could see the energy. But the thing that really stood out to me, and this honestly was like the biggest tipper, and there was two things. One was Kyle gave me his blueprint, which was something that he had written of his vision for the company, and he was outlining this very big, ambitious goal of what Matthews was going to build.
21 pages, 20 pages more than I'd written in my life.
I call it kind of a manifesto in a way, which sounds bad, but
nowadays, yeah.
But it really wasn't. It wasn't just the vision for the company. It also outlined his vision. It outlined the way that he thinks about culture and people and opportunity. And it just very much resonated with me. And so that was really big. That hit me on my drive home. I actually had my wife drive so I could read it. So I'm reading it on my way back, driving through, the sand dunes to get back to Arizona. But the other thing was actually the way that people interacted with Kyle as we walked through the office. And it was, there was very much a respect. There was a magnetism to his leadership that I immediately knew that he was somebody that could be that people would buy into and rally around and behind and believe in. And you could have the best concepts in the world, like all the things that we do, they're great concepts. But if you don't have the right people and the right leadership, you're not going to attract the right kinds of people to actually make it happen. And I could tell that the fact that I wanted to be here and work with him after spending some time with him, and I could tell all these other people, they weren't just here because of some system or some tool or even the culture. I think those are all parts of it, but there's also a belief in the leadership. And so that was really big, and that kind of made me feel like this was the right decision. Of course, I prayed about it and felt good about it from that standpoint as well. But I did almost take a step back when I first walked into the El Segundo office to go meet with Ratty for the first time. I walked in there and that carpet was It was
Coffee
scary.
stains. Like,
It was
oh.
so scary.
It was raw, man. That was a real thing.
And I got hungry, and Ratty said, "Oh yeah, there's some food in the kitchen." And I go in to get some snacks, and the refrigerator. It was like,
Yeah, don't open a fridge.
it
in
was
a
so
Matthews
scary, and I was
office.
Yeah.
so it
People
was
live there.
it was a little sketch, but I had a great meeting. I had a great meeting, and it felt like a FedEx warehouse or something. But it was so good though, because I met with Ratty there, and at the company that I was at, we were both young, growing, scaling brokerage companies, and Ratty and I were very much doing the same job at these two different
Overlapping,
companies.
right?
Yeah. So Ratty was taking on CFO, COO. He's trying to oversee HR, trying to see all the functions, marketing, and meanwhile,
legal and compliance.
yeah. And meanwhile, I'm on the other side doing the exact same stuff. I'm sitting here writing broker policies and doing all this stuff at this other firm. And so the opportunity to partner with him and actually focus on the parts of my job that candidly I
Hand
think
each
I'm
other
best at.
back the parts.
The parts we're best at, right?
exactly.
And so, he was able to focus on the parts he was best at. I was able to focus on the parts I was best at. So that also gives you that when you feel like, hey, I can add value here. You see that it makes you want to be there.
And, when you play the position, you feel like you're meant to play, like you kind of hit your flow state. Very kind words about being magnanimous. I've never been called, this is amazing. I've thought about self-reflect. You're like, okay, what, in my humble opinion, what makes me at times an effective leader? And in my opinion, I think the reason the guys and gals at Matthews listen to me or follow me or whatever adjective you want to use is, and this is just my opinion, my humble opinion, is because on average, I'm never going to ask them to do something I didn't do. I'm never going to ask them not just to do a job I didn't do, but never ask them to commit the effort. And so when you're saying, hey, this thing was wild, like, yeah, they looked up to me, but the energy and like they're working, they're getting in at 6, leaving at 8, and they're choosing to do that. It's because early in the days, because I personally directly answered their question, Kyle, what does it take to be successful in brokerage? How can I get to where you got as a broker? And say, okay, this is what I did. It wasn't like you have to do it because I'm telling you have to do it. It was, this is what I did based on my life experience. It worked very well. This is the way. It's a very basic and fundamental approach. And the first thing we do is wake up before the competition. So even when I founded Matthews, for the first 4 or 5 years, I would get in at 5:45 and I'd just stand by the front door. And, guys would come in, 6:15, which at any other company is wildly early. And I just let them know very quietly. I'm not a yeller. Just like, hey, I question your motivation. There's no way a guy like me should be beating you in. And, that culture of accountability, not really a top-down management, but like just
leading from the front.
Leading from the front, leading by example, right?
Yeah, it's credibility.
Combined with a historical look back, when I say, hey, early on, you should be making 500 prospecting calls a week, and that will start to come down as you list deals and you're pitching deals and all that, but like start at 500. Some people just blindly say, okay, cool, those are great guys, super coachable, but some are like, well, why? And, and you're like, well, I did this. And by the way, I kept every call sheet I ever had. I kept every proposal I ever did. For nothing else, posterity's sake. And then all of a sudden I was like, well, here are my call sheets, and it worked for me. And it's hard for a younger professional who might be inherently cynical or just not used to working that hard. It's like, well, if this guy's telling me to do this, I probably should do it. And then where the culture really became its own thing was when they look to their right, they look to their left, they look in front of them, behind them, and there's, and again, early on, you start a brokerage company with not much capital. There's not much inherent, there's good tech, especially relative to the industry, but like to go get senior producers, right? You don't have much to offer. So really the way to build a brokerage company and it's at scale is you got to hire young to the business. It doesn't have to be like physically young, though most of them are coming out of college. And just they look and they see a bunch of people who are in their first, second, third year, just like them, whose skills are kind of where their skills at. There's a lot of growth needed, and they're getting in at 6 and they're staying late and they're making those calls and they're working the weekends. Then all of a sudden, the culture starts to take care of itself. I had this experience at USC when I played football there. We had some tough coaches, but most of the intensity of the program was driven by the captains, right? And so we had our culture champions, which were our version of team captains in every office, and they kind of took they kind of took care of themselves. Certainly we'd supervise them from a real estate perspective and contracts perspective and underwriting perspective, but the actual day-to-day, like getting in early and working your ass off, like that was just something that became its own thing. And if I had to assign one thing that I might have been able to help create that, it was just because not only two things, I had done that. And that in and of itself is powerful. Well, I did that when I was your age, but it actually, you lose a little bit when you become the guy. Well, I did that when I was your age. I don't do it anymore though. And again, that should be effective. Like, hey, you want to get to, but it was, I did it when I was your age and I still do it. And, I had 2 kids at the time and I was working 13, 14 hours a day. God bless my wife. Looking back, that was a lot, but that's just, you have that fear of failure, that anxiety, and it gets you up in the morning and it drives you to do great things. And I think that led to a great culture.
Well, I think, Kyle, too, another thing that I feel is really a big part of it is when you think about any great leader in history that's created a movement of some kind, they have a dream, they have a big vision, they have an idea, but they believe it, and they authentically believe in that vision or that dream or that thing that they're talking about. And that's one thing that I really appreciate about working at a founder-led company is you have the original individuals that have that vision or that dream and they're convicted to it. They're not just trying to sell someone else's idea or dream or belief, and it's very authentic and people can buy into it and get behind it. And so I feel like that's something that people can see and feel is they know you really believe this.
That's a great description. I mean, like, those are better words than I gave it. But words just in general can't do it justice. As a human being, when you're deciding, and for us that are very motivated and want to grow our careers and want to do big things in life, you're betting a lot when you bet on your career, right? And you go with the founder. And that's sort of what I was trying to describe earlier, right? I mean, you felt that same thing. And I can't describe it. There's a certain feeling when you know that individual is going to do it. And that's probably because they believe in it so deeply. Yeah. And that's all it really takes most of the time. The hard work and the belief and those fundamentals that have made successful people and great things in humanity.
I've always looked at our culture. We've talked about this as like, I said the intersection of hard work. And we touched on hard work and where it came from and how that became a thing at Matthews. And it's still to this day. I mean, these guys get after it. But then the other piece is the technology, and from day one, and how that's obviously iterated, evolves, and continues to. I mean, it's just wild what those guys are building. That was the like I said, it's so much deeper than that. But those two things.
But if you didn't start with that foundation of the shared database from day one, yep, you can't do the things that we're doing with technology today and going forward, and trying to take a company with several hundred agents like we have now and transform the entire operating culture and the way they approach would be so difficult. And so that's
like 800 agents.
Yeah, that's why I asked that question. Like, at what point did you?
We'd have 800 be like, nah, I don't want to do this.
Because the original value proposition of a shared database was really about sharing information, not about all the things that now enables us to do with AI and looking forward with technology. And so we're fortunate that we started there and that we saw that initial value proposition and that was there. But that laid the foundation for everything else.
It's exactly this, really. It's tying it together. We're talking about some of the old days and having one office in El Segundo. And then if you fast forward over the 10 and a half years we sit here today, there's this reality of the growth that has occurred. And you might look at it and say, well, okay, how did you do that part? And that is the foundation of it, is the commitment to the hard work, the elements of the culture that exist there. But then I go back to what really still is our ultimate goal, is to provide the greatest amount of value to our clients, number one. But that extends into how we provide an infrastructure and a system and a culture and a home for all of the agents that work with us to now be focused on their own revenue producing activities that are going to be in the best interest of the clients. And that really extends to, of course, exactly what we're talking about here, because the technology, and we talk about the shared database and really the shared services support, everything that goes into giving an agent that works with us their time back so they can do the job that the client truly hires them to do. So that can't be lost on any of this, because we are fundamentally different than your traditional brokerage company that exists in the industry today. And it is the marriage of the commitment to excellence with the technology and the support for our agents to allow them to provide the absolute best service that yields the best result for our client that has led to the result you've seen. So none of it is this, fluffy idea and, hey, I'd like to do this thing. Like, this has actually worked, even to a greater scale than what we thought it would, and it will lead to an even greater result 10 years from today.
There's something you touched on there that I'll just add from a different perspective. Again, I came from product companies, very different, but where engineering and manufacturing are closely linked together, you get the best product. So this wasn't technology built by people from outside the industry. This was technology built by brokers for brokers. It's a very different way to approach that. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about right there.
And I'm just really setting the table for what the core tenets of the value proposition are that we provide to the marketplace, really the owners that exist in the industry, along with all of the agents that work with us and provide service levels of all kinds. And it is the information that's available to them because of the one ecosystem that they're all tied into, that they all work within, which is a foreign concept to so many agents that are outside of these walls. It is these services that we provide the agents to give them their time back, because the clients want them, working on maximizing the value of their asset if they're selling it, or if they're leasing space, or if they're obtaining debt, whatever that is, they want them out there doing that. They want them finding them new opportunities. And our agents have more time to do that because of what we've built. And we begin to look at the evolution of how all of this has occurred with our mind on this technology from the very beginning of having a different type of technology 10 years ago when you started it, to say, this isn't good enough. And for all of us, part of the reason we continue to be successful and will be is because it's not good enough today. I wake up every day and I'm not good enough. I'm going to get better personally and professionally. And so we share that trait, and that leads to continued growth for us as a company. And the technology piece is so critically important. And when you understand the amount of time we've invested, the amount of capital we've invested, and having this go back, this wasn't something we thought of 6 months ago. This was years ago that we've been working on this. And now
That seed.
we've reached
You're
this.
talking about the new system, Artemis?
I'm talking about Artemis and really the birth of what that is, and this moment in time where we find ourselves saying, we are at this new place where we are beholden to no one. The technology that we've built, this ecosystem that everyone lives within, that will impact the entire industry, even well beyond brokerage, is ready to be accelerated. And we're doing that today. So I believe it's important to talk a little bit about that technology, because that's a piece of what all of our agents get to enjoy. And then, of course, the fruits of that productivity are born to our clients.
Well, it's just an extension of the core concepts. Like you said, it's about giving agents time back, giving clients. It's about accuracy, quality, speed to market, doing that at scale, and being able to offer that to even newer agents, younger agents that are starting out in the business that at other firms don't have access to that kind of support and infrastructure. That's a big part of how we've obviously accelerated so many young agents' careers. Of course, we have our training and the culture, but it's also, empowering them with a really strong tool set. And as we've laid the foundation with the shared database, and now we're moving into the AI revolution, right? We now have the opportunity to continue to build on those same core concepts and tenets and service delivery, but do it in a different way through technology. And that's all enabled by that initial decision to go with, kind of a core shared ecosystem. And so, I do think, there's always a component of, what's the phrase? It's, the harder I work, the luckier I get, know, but I do think there were some things that were good ideas that have played into, really fortuitous, opportunities that have set us up.
And as a CEO, and we've discussed in I think we all share this. Like I've always had a proclivity to wanting to be vertically integrated, and owning as much of our supply chain as we can, which a huge portion of what we do is our tech stack. And so owning as much of that, and so having proprietary technology to the degree we have that's wholly owned. There's a cost control aspect to that, which just from like a functional day-to-day running a business is super valuable. But then it's to your point, it's like the evolution of the technology. Rowdy, you said, for brokers, built by brokers. You are correct. It's actually built by those engineers over there, but we're telling them what to do because I don't know how to do that.
The two head brokers here.
I don't know how to do that. Maybe through some vibe coding tools, maybe. But yeah, like I always looked at, there's four main things that make up a real estate professional's why. Like why would they come to Matthews? Why would they stay at Matthews? All these is, one is economics, like so brokers that split, employees that could be salary and compensation. So economics, that's important. Technology, so the tech stack that we provide them. Okay. Third, and most days this feels like number one, is culture. It's like, how does this place make me feel, right? And that is a big input into job satisfaction. And the last is growth opportunity, which for an employee, that's career growth in a traditional sense. For a broker, that could be deployment opportunity, it could be team building opportunity, it could be product and market opportunity. Because as big as we are, we have close to 1,000 people. There's still so many markets and product types, but we don't have someone in, and so there's so much growth opportunity. So when you really stack up, from a Matthews value proposition to a professional, regardless of whether you're on the platform side or the broker side, is economics are great, technology is out of this world, the culture, again, Pepsi challenges, like I'll put against anyone, the culture is unbeatable, and we have, even to this day, like just incredible opportunities for growth for employees and agents. And I think that's people, they say, man, how have you done this? Like, and again, self-funded, there's never been acquisitions. There's never been, okay, let's take on capital, accelerate growth, nothing. It's those four things. And at any given, look, every day we wake up and we're like, this sucks. We got to be better here. We got to be better. But like respectfully, to have all the four of those things firing on all cylinders the way they are today, that doesn't mean it'll be that way tomorrow. And I think that's what gets us up in the morning to this day. I really think that is the answer to kind of the magic, not just of Matthews, but the magic of the performance and what we've been able to accomplish in really a short amount of time.
Yeah, look, I would throw in to just piggyback on what you just said, is understanding there are a lot of people who are watching this who are maybe not as familiar with our company or are interested in the industry, is that we have created, without a doubt, the best commercial real estate training program that exists
Matthews
anywhere.
University, baby.
It is the best.
We should start handing out degrees and diplomas.
We should. Look, we have spent a tremendous amount of time and effort.
We could sell that thing
to put that together, so it is a very meaningful training program, so people actually get something from it and can go apply it into the real world. And what I also don't need to get lost in any of that is, it's not just for someone new to the industry to come in and train for a period of months.
I would argue, look, we get a lot of established agents coming here and they have books of business, they're successful, but man, fundamentally, so many of them are so unsound, they probably need it more than anyone.
It's the fundamentals from a sales perspective, but it's also some of the brokerage 201 activities that are taking place, and how to level up, how to continue to do things that are going to accelerate your own growth. And we're applying that on a weekly basis in every one of our offices, and that's from people getting in and making sure we're adhering to the tenets of the fundamentals, but of course also finding opportunities to be topical and to address the needs of our agents in real time. And let's evolve together in that way as well. And so we're doing a lot of trainings and giving people a lot of opportunity to learn more about the industry, whether it's through financial analysis of assets or...
Look, we have Matthews U, which is, again, best training program in the industry by far, award-winning. We actually got some awards. But then there's the apprenticeship program, right? The mentor-mentee. So it's the immersion training is phenomenal. Then a 2 to 3 year real apprenticeship, and so that actually allows us to widen our pool of candidates that we can hire. And I'll focus on the brokerage side right now, to where, because we're going to teach you skill sets, you don't actually have to have them coming in. It's great if you are coming out of school with a real estate finance degree. That's a great skill to have, and it will accelerate your success, but it actually isn't mandatory, isn't something you have to have, because we're going to teach you how to underwrite. We're going to teach you how to look at a property like an analyst would. If you have experience, as an acquisitions person, buying properties or disposition, selling, or a real estate attorney or a property manager, all of those things are phenomenal skill sets to have. All of them will help you in this career of brokerage. None of them are necessary, at least not at Matthews, because we're going to train all that. We talk all the time. We hire mindsets. We don't hire skill sets. We love it if you have skill sets. That's great. That much more probable getting hired. But at the end of the day, it could be someone straight out of school who's got a degree in history, all right? If we meet with that guy or gal and we really, as much as we can, get to know them over a couple rounds of interviews, they come in, shadow a broker, and we see that there's an absolute dog in that person, like, we're going to hire them because we're going to teach them the skill sets. But we can't teach people mindsets. We say it all the time. We cannot teach a mindset. I get asked all the time, how do you get so many young people to work this hard? And I always answer, well, I don't get them to work this hard. They've already decided they want to work this hard. What we're really good at is not getting them to work hard, is identifying, finding, and hiring the people who've already chosen to work hard. And then putting them, like I said earlier, this gets to the culture, around 50 other savages in the office. And then especially if they've already said to themselves, whatever I do in life, I'm going to work my ass off. And in this case, it's brokerage. They're probably competitive. Like there's a competitive foundation to that type of mentality, the mindset we hire. Then you put them in an office where we do all types of competitions. Like competing is a huge thing here. And we have a ton of fun with it. But I mean this sincerely. I don't think we have to do a single competition. Truly, these guys and gals, they'll compete against each other. They'll compete like who's going to be the top caller, who's going to get in earliest, who's going to research the most, who's going to have the best, who's going to win the most business, and certainly who's going to be the number one agent in the office or the country. And that's just how it is. And iron sharpens iron. It's getting back to, how did I get on this? You were talking about the training program, and I was like, dude, it's phenomenal. And that actually allows us to widen the aperture of hires to where, from what I can tell, all right, other companies, look, when I came out of college, I didn't have a real estate degree. I interviewed at Cushman & Wakefield and CBRE, and neither of them hired me, all right? And you know what? They shouldn't have hired me because I didn't know how to underwrite. I didn't have any analyst back. I had never taken a real estate class. I had no development experience. And so I just didn't know anything. I didn't have the skills, okay? And there's a lot of kids today, for whatever reason, they're in that position coming out of school where they're like, gosh, I didn't take the right class, or maybe I didn't get the right GPA, or I didn't know this is what I wanted to do. Like if you got that right mentality, that's why we do the Matthews Mentality podcast, is exploring the mindsets and mentalities of like just hyper-driven, successful people, is because that's what we're hiring for. We'll teach them the skill sets. God bless real estate. It is not a super complicated business. It's 1 + 1 is 2. It's simple math. But really, the challenge is finding people who are willing to work the hours and suffer through the rejection and the failure that comes with those first 3, 4, 5 years in the business. And if we're good at anything, that's what we're good at.
Because we have a culture
that
is going to support those people when they sink down into that valley of despair.
The valley of despair
that we talk about, because it's a real thing.
And even then, we lose a lot of them. You can't save them all.
You're not going to save them all, but so many more make it because they have a web of support that's right there with them. And it's the people in the office with them, but it's also just the general company's ethos is to provide the support to the agents that work with us so they can work on very high value activities.
It's their teammates, it's their mentors, it's their market leaders. There's a wide support network that's immediately on the sales floor, besides the platform and everybody else in management, right? But here's something that, again, coming from a different industry, when we say training, it's not a textbook. It's about the individual, because you just touch on one of the very important lessons of the valley of despair. There's so many of those lessons of not rebuilding the individual, right? You all are selecting the right individuals, finding them. Our market leaders are recruiting in 50 different schools, thousands of resumes, right? And so it's really about when the individual comes in, you're teaching the sales skills, how they can be a successful professional, what the fundamentals are, certainly of the textbook part of real estate. But again, maybe touch on that on the training. It's such a more comprehensive, it's a sphere, it's a circle. It's not just this linear thing on underwriting properties and here's what people want to hear and here's how you make a market.
Right. Because there's the technical side of real estate, and Kyle said it's not all that complicated because it isn't. But you do need to understand some of those concepts behind the financial analysis. You need to know the different nuances of all the product types of commercial real estate. But ultimately, we're in a people business. There are people that are behind the ownership of these assets that are making decisions on how to best operate their property. If they're going to transact, what does that look like? If they're going to recapitalize, how are they going to handle that? And you need to be effective at that interpersonal piece, at that relationship building exercise. And that is grounded in how do I add value, right? So we are training on that as well. How do you add value? How do you become a market expert? There's so much that goes into that. And our entire notion of bringing someone into the business and really launching them into the marketplace is to provide the training and the skills and the support so they can add value much quicker than anyone else ever could. And when you have the relationship with the mentor being in there as well, there's a lot of wins that you could place on that. And ultimately, we're looking for the client to win through the value addition that's created throughout this entire program.
One thing I actually want to kind of come back to because it's so important and it needs more time. And Dirk, I'm going to ask you this question because you're likely to know the most. The tech stack, the platform, and the amazing people, but let's dive into the technology. Let's not assume that the viewer, the listener, whether they're a broker or a principal, knows, well, okay, great, you have technology. How does that benefit me? So if you could, in 5 minutes or less, and then you could, I know you could talk 5 hours about this, 5 days, give kind of a high-level overview, whether it's from an agent or owner, like this is how it's going to help you be more successful.
Well, I think there's really two different layers to it. One of it is our ability we're an intermediary, right? Whether we're connecting buyers and sellers, tenants and landlords, or debt providers, with a sponsor. In each case, having the shared database is part of it, is having the information, but then building technology on top of that that's able to identify the highest probability parties to put together on a transaction. And so that's such a big part of what we do, is connecting them through leveraging machine learning, AI, different segmentation approaches to be able to identify, who is the most likely buyer for this particular transaction, or which lender is most likely to have the best, rates, terms, and execution on this particular loan, et cetera. And so that is at the core fundamental. And then there's the second part of it, and it's really the deal management, the transaction management, and it's really about the things we've talked about a little bit in giving the agents time back. And that's through, different automations that we have built into our platform and are currently very much accelerating as we transition from, having lots of people. We have a huge operations team and people that are sitting behind the technology right now that allows our agents, our clients to interface with technology tools that are backed by really strong, capable teams. And they still will be going forward, but we're automating a lot of that through technology. And what does that mean for a broker? What does that mean for a client? It means faster execution. And so we can still do it at a very high quality, but we're not seeing so much redundant, duplicative entry of information over and over and over again. We're putting it into our shared ecosystem one time, leveraging that data over and over and over again for all the various outputs, needs, business lines that we have, and then collecting all that metadata and building on that collective intelligence, or that brain that helps us understand our clients, the markets, the opportunities, and be a better advisor. So that's kind of the best way I could sum it up in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's great.
So
we got to do a separate episode of just you explaining all of that in detail.
It would be
Ratty,
hours.
You also work a lot on that. Anything you want to add to what Dirk said?
I think we started the right way by focusing on the data, focusing on being a market maker, right? So obviously we don't use that as much in our industry, but when I talk with insurance companies or other external parties, banks, this is what we talk about. We are a market maker, an intermediary. I always say, look, the size of the market without brokers is X. And with brokers, it's why. It's bigger market because we help transactions happen by understanding the motivation of what clients want in their portfolios, right? And so when you look at that technology stack, data is the core of it. Because look, in today's day and age, coding, vibe coding, getting what you want in a UI, UX, getting the database to perform that UI, UX operationally, it's becoming easier and easier by the day. It's becoming cheaper and cheaper by the day, at least for us. I don't know how much Anthropic and others are paying for what we get, but that's amazing for us. It's cheap. So therefore, it's not about that as much as it is about the data. It's about getting those agents effectively and easily to input that in a very simple way. It's getting that metadata. It's getting the intelligence from there. It's, look, the coding and the UI, the UX, it's about building that fire. Everything else is just firewood. And the heat that that's outputting is all data. So for me, the seed of the company and that shared database and everything we've built over this decade and a half has been about the data. Now we can operationalize that. Now we can turn that into an effective force multiplier of being the best market maker there is.
Well said. All right. Anything you want to add? If not, we got a couple lightning round questions.
Yeah, I'll just to go on with what Ratty was saying. That really is our ability to unlock insights for the marketplace that have been more challenging or not as available. Certainly from a brokerage company's perspective, because we've said this a number of times, I always refer to the tech platform as an ecosystem. It is living and breathing. Data decay is a real thing. And because we have so many people inside of our ecosystem, and because we have created pathways to pull in data from multiple sources, it all lives in one place. And so for our agents, they can access it in a fashion that eliminates the noise and the clutter that so many of us have experienced from having different applications or logins that you have to go to cobble these things together. So our ability to aggregate that in one place and have it be available, and then importantly, for us to be able to take all of that data and now activate it in a way that it becomes valuable to the client, because we are going to give insights on what's happening inside of a particular marketplace, and we can distill this down to operational momentum and trends that are happening for a product type. We can look at the flow of capital across geographies. We can look at the flow of capital across product types because of how we're structured, because of that ecosystem. And that, you said force multiplier, I love that way to position it because that's exactly what it is. And the way that we are capturing this value proposition is not available to other companies because of some of the old traditional, archaic models of how they are structured and how they operate that will provide limitations on what they're able to execute on. And we don't have those limitations today, and we won't.
All right. That was great. Let's do rapid round. You guys ready?
Ready.
All right, I'm going to start. Dave, I'll start with you. Name a book that shaped your leadership.
It would be a book I read a long time ago. This was Steve Jobs, the Walter Isaacson book that he wrote on Steve Jobs, and just really understanding his passion for, having a difference in the world, of creating this product that wasn't just a product, And so for me, I would say, understanding how this was his entire life, and he really believed, we talked about that belief that you would have in your own ability to go and, shape the future and how that defines you as a leader. I mean, that's very much who I am, is understanding that I have this massive opportunity in front of me and I'm going to seize it, and I believe fully in it. And I am going to, as Steve Jobs did, bend the reality around me to make it so.
Reality distortion field,
Yeah.
So I asked you that question. I was sitting here, and I'll go next. I was like, okay, what book? And I was like, it's just Jobs, because I fascinated and I admire his obsessiveness over everything matters, every little detail. And I think that's why for the longest time, Apple made such great products. I thought about Musk. I'm going to go with, it's a book called Titan. It's about John D. Rockefeller. What that guy built, the most valuable company in the world, which to this day is, if you look at what it was broken up to, is probably still the most valuable company. his approach is the effort he put in, his his thoroughness, and his courage to take chances. And you describe him as ruthless. No, he was competing at business, and he was competing to win. And you read that book. It's a lot. It's about 1,000 pages, but it's a phenomenal book. What about you, Dirk?
You know, there's a lot of different books I like. I mean, Extreme Ownership. I really like Mindset by Carol Dweck. It talks about growth mindset, which is great. But one that I've recently found myself recommending to every new manager or leader to read is Radical Candor. I really like that book because I feel like it puts names around different leadership tactics that you can employ and helps you to be intentional within your leadership. In particular, terms like ruinous empathy or radical candor, which is kind of the other side of that, and it helps you to be aware of where you maintain the best interest of those that you're leading, and do so sometimes by having difficult conversations and being candid with them and saying hard truths. And so it just puts a good framework to help you execute that effectively. And so that's one that I found myself recommending really to every new manager or leader.
Yeah, it's a great one. You recommended it to me, and I read
Yeah.
it, and I got a lot out of it. Actually, I mean, genuinely. Ratty, you.
All great books. I've read about half of them, especially those first two. I'll tell you, it's more about an author, and there's probably a couple of the early books, but I'm of the generation where we came up in the Jack Welch era, right? So General Electric was sort of the leading company of America, top of, S&P 500, whatever it is, in terms of measures. They didn't do everything correct, and they were lucky for a lot of things, right? They sort of mirrored the American economy as it grew, sort of from plastics to financialization, essentially. But I will say, look, when you look at those first books, and either one by Jack Welch, if you look them up, the thing that they had in them that has not changed. And he said, look, yeah, we got some things right in strategy and we worked hard and we have this process, but really what he was about and what that company was about was growing leaders. It was about leadership and those fundamentals of leadership. He said, ultimately, yes, I'm the CEO, but I'm really the head of HR. And he said, if I look at most of the time that I spend at the company, it is people reviews. And he was famous. They'd fly out to, well, famous for many things, also Neutron Jack, but that's not the part I'm talking about. They would fly to a site, a given factory, and would have everybody, the roster up on the whiteboard, pictures, backgrounds, what people were working on. And that's what it's about. I mean, we've been talking about AI this whole time. What is it? What is that? Who's coding that? It's people. It's our engineers. It's our brokers. We're a company of 1,000 people, hopefully a company of many more thousands coming into the future, but it's all about the people process, and I think he gets that right. Maybe not the particulars, but the concept, I think, very good in terms of laying that out.
No, I love, and one of them. I don't know if he wrote it. I think he did. It was Jack.
Yeah, that's one of the first ones.
That was
I
the
couldn't
one I
remember.
read. That was
Yeah.
the one I read. It was fantastic. And obviously, the thing we always talk about is like, oh, the bottom 10% every year.
Yes,
I mean,
the rank and yank.
yeah, rank and yank. But yeah, no, I mean, certainly throughout his helm, very successful. I'm going to stay with you, Ratty. Best advice you've ever received. That's a big one.
Obviously professionally. Let's keep it.
Yeah, you guys can
I
think
think
about
we've
this.
touched on it, but I might as well say it here live. Coming into this industry, and we talked about training, brokerage is very, very different than many things in life, right? I mean, again, different industries, different geography, but coming into Southern California brokerage and seeing it from one of the top brokers ever yourself, I would say one of the biggest pieces of advice, and I think I told you this, is setting expectations. Believe it or not, having a career. I went through a leadership development program at a Fortune 500, right? I worked in public companies. We talked about that. Never once was I taught that. And yeah, you get little fringes of that, right? Make sure you set the right expectations, right? If you think it's going to be 3 days, make it 5 days. Okay, those are fundamentals. But the way we think about setting expectations in brokerage is an incredible skill. It gets taught to our agents fundamentally through a different set of angles. It has been life-changing in my career.
Yeah. For me, honestly, I would say it's really about taking an ownership mindset to everything you do. Treating each task, activity, responsibility as if it's yours. And in a way, if you're working at an organization, taking the approach that it's your company, whether or not you're a shareholder in the company, if you approach your job with that mindset, that's how that comes to fruition, because you're able to create more value when you're not taking a transactional approach to your relationship with the organization you're working with. If you show up and you're trading time for money and you're just doing a job, you're gonna think about it very differently than if you show up with an owner mindset where you say, I understand what we're trying to do, I understand our goals and how we're gonna accomplish them, and I'm gonna do whatever it takes to make this successful, because I believe that if I'm successful, however small your role was. I started in commercial real estate working in the mailroom, and I would stay late at night, till 9 p.m. on a Friday to get something in the mail, because this was before email, really marketing happened, but to get it in the mail so that it could hit owners' desks on Monday so we could try and get that deal sold. I wasn't going to get a commission for doing that. I wasn't even going to get paid extra for it once they switched me to salary because I was working so many hours, but I did it because I felt like if that helped us win as an organization, that would help. Eventually, that would trickle down to me, and it did. I advanced in my career because of it, and so I'm a huge believer in taking an owner mindset, and I think that's been a big part of what's helped me in my career.
Mine's it's all about efforts from my dad. It's all he ever talked about. He coached Ratty too, so Ratty knows what I'm talking about. But all he ever talked about was effort. He never talked about outcomes. I could have scored 3 touchdowns. I could have hit 5 home runs in a game. He'd be cheering, but if we got in the car, and he was pretty good, he's pretty quiet, but like if he ever commented on anything, it was about my effort. And either, hey, you put phenomenal effort in, or hey, and there were some hard conversations, like that was not the effort that I need to see. And in less polite words, right? And he did a good job of convincing me at a young age, when it's hard to convince your kids of anything you say is right, that effort doesn't guarantee outcome, but it correlates. And so over time, I learned that if I put more effort into something, I wasn't guaranteed the outcome I wanted, but there was a strong correlation. And that ultimately is the story of my brokerage success, and ultimately this company's success is credit to my dad. When I started in brokerage, I looked around the room, that's what we do. We size everyone up, and you're like, all right, it's just like football. It's like, am I bigger than that guy? Am I faster? Am I stronger? You hope you are. Those are great. But respectfully, you can't control how big or fast or strong, to some degree you're born, but you can control your effort. And when I started in brokerage, I looked around the room. I said, am I a better salesperson naturally than these people? Like Dave said, I got an ego. I was like, yeah, I think so, but I don't know. And there might be some people who are just naturally more affable, gregarious. They're better salespeople. Am I smarter than these people? I feel like I'm somewhat smart, but yeah, there's probably some people in here who just from an acuity just pick up real estate finance faster than I do, or underwriting, evaluating properties. But I knew that I can control my effort, and I knew that I would put in more effort. And effort, like for me, just the first place I started was like, I went to my manager the first day. Who gets in the earliest? He's like, that guy over there. And it's 6:15, he gets in. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna get in at 6. And then I go, who stays the latest? And he's like, that gal over there, I think usually 7:30, 7:45. I was like, okay, I'm gonna leave at 8. And that's how I defined effort initially. And I did that for 15 years because I knew the only thing I absolutely couldn't control was my effort. And I tell my kids this, it's all I talk to them about. I say, hey, I hope you score the winning goal or whatever, and I'll be cheering louder than anyone. But the only thing I really care about is your effort. And if you put great effort, no matter what happens, like we're going to get in this car, it's going to be great. If I ever see, and I tell them the same thing my dad told me and his dad told him, but if I ever come to your game and I see bad effort, I'm going to walk on that field and yank your ass off it, because that's all you can control.
Truer words have never been spoken.
Big Clay.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. Effort. You got to step up and give it. That's the one thing you can control, as you just said. The advice for me really I would say, professionally being in a sales background was from my old mentor. And it effectively was ask for the business. And it was positioned to me in maybe a way that he only could give
John
it.
Walsh, baby.
John Walsh, which was to say, what do you mean you didn't ask for the listing, or something like that. It was this natural, there's a flow, here it is. Of course you're going to ask for the business, and you have to do that consistently, and you cannot take that for granted. Oftentimes you create a relationship with someone, and it could be a great relationship. Maybe someone I've actually closed deals with, and maybe I'm not doing my job as a salesperson to be in front of them and adding the value in the way that I should, and then following up by asking for business again. And so that was a stark reminder for me. So many times in my head, it got to a point where I was innately good at the sales process, and I listened very closely for the windows of opportunity, but I still had that yellow sticky note at the bottom of my monitor on my computer that said, ask for the business. And that's because of what John had said early on, is really accepting this as a part of the process and just close. You have to close. And so that had always been a reminder for me, and it led to my consistent ability to go on 5 meetings every single week while still keeping up a high volume of calls. And you don't ask, you don't get. And the quicker you ask, then the quicker you are able to flush out objections and overcome those and just be a part of that process, and you're actually getting somewhere. Because until you ask for the business, you're not moving down the field in a way that will be as meaningful for you. And some people reach a comfort level, and I was guilty of that too at times, but became better more times than not at closing.
Don't make the assumption they know what you're there for. It's so true. That gets to the next question, Dirk. I'll start with you. What's something you had to learn the hard way?
I think really it was think before you react to things. Early in my career, I'd get an interaction, I'd have an interaction with somebody where I would respond emotionally very quickly to an email or to a message. And so, that obviously backfires pretty quickly when you do that. And so learning to, really take a step back and think about it objectively and try to separate my emotions from my response has helped me a lot. But early in my career, my former mentor, the COO at the first company I was at, he would come to me sometimes after I would fire off an email, and he would say hey, you should have thought about this first. Here's what would have been better. Here's a better response. And just doing that, maybe start really watching how he responded to high stress situations, and then really modeling my responses after that, which usually just meant taking a minute to really think about it before I responded.
Ratty, what about you? What's something you had to learn the hard way?
I've worked for a lot of wonderful people. One of them is Michelle Stacy at Keurig, and she was an amazing leader, president of Keurig. And she always said, work on your strengths versus your weaknesses. And I have one modifier on that, which is, I think we're all generally aware of either one of those buckets. The one that is unspoken is blind spots. Okay, so that's the hard lesson for me. I think we know where we're strong, we know where we're weak, and I think she's right. You can work on the strengths and get further than the weaknesses. However, don't have blind spots. Try to explore those blind spots through your partner in life, through your professional partners in life, through your spouse at home, through your friends and family. Always question what you're not seeing. And that is the most dangerous of all, because just be aware of it, right? And I think that's my learning, is ferreting that out. For me, ferreting that out was taking new, difficult opportunities. A startup is one of those opportunities. And coming here, I had blind spots. Going from Keurig to Shark Ninja, I had blind spots. Each time you take new opportunities, you learn something new about yourself. And the more difficult they are, the more you learn.
That's great. Dave?
It's funny, you remind me of when I was growing up, my mom, when I would do something stupid as a kid, she's like, honey, you are just going to have to learn the hard way, aren't you? Because, you do that as a kid sometimes. And, professionally speaking, it was definitely when I entered into brokerage and I'm sitting there, I get into this super competitive environment, and I'm a very competitive person. So I come in and, much like we still believe today, like I am going to outwork every single one of you here. I'm going to make more calls. I'm going to do more deals. I'm going to do this whole approach. It led me into this Scorched earth campaign. I was the guy on top of the Humvee in the desert with the 50 cal just blowing up everything in sight, right? That was my approach. And it worked for a while. I actually was getting things going, but I wasn't focused on what the true necessity was for our business. And, today I have certain keywords that anytime I'm talking to someone about the business, the word relationships comes up constantly for me. And the hard lesson was scorched earth is not the way. It is not the way to do it. And I was trapped in that. Luckily, it didn't take me long to realize that I had to have a long-term relationship-based focus on how to approach my interactions with people, and knowing that I needed to come adding value to that rather than just, hey, let me figure out a way to put this deal together, which I had a good nose for, and unlocking that motivation, and let me go dive in and I can put this together and then on to the next. I needed to, have some lessons taught to me early in my career. And just one quick anecdote, a guy I just saw 2 nights ago told me, a very big owner of multifamily, one of the largest, in fact, in the country. I sold him a property early in my career, and I was fortunate to have a working relationship with him. And it had been about a year that had gone by, and he said, Dave, you sold me this deal, and I appreciate all the other dialogue, but you haven't asked me about that deal one time. And I sat there and I thought about it, and I said, yeah, you're right, I haven't. He said, you haven't asked me how it's going? How's the operations? What's happening? And boy, what a stupid thing that was for me. And I realized, God, I'm just moving too fast and breaking shit, and I needed to be more focused on how am I going to foster this relationship. I sold this person a deal which had been going well, and I certainly stand an opportunity to sell it for them again. Do not take that for granted. Going back to asking for the business, well, let me be thoughtful about that and how to nurture that relationship along the way and add some value, and then get to this place of where, of course, they're going to give me the business at that time, and I have a less of a need to ask for it. But scorched earth versus long-term relationship-based focus, that was the lesson for me.
That's a great lesson. My answer to something I had to learn the hard way is everything. Every single thing I know, at least professionally speaking, I've had to learn the hard way, and at least that I can tell. And the hard way is failure. So I failed at everything. So cold calling, I eventually learned how to do that really well. I learned by failing hundreds of thousands of times, especially early in my career, we say 500, 600 cold calls a week and not listing a deal for a year, not closing a deal for 18 months. Like, you want to talk about failure? How did I learn to cold call? The hard way. Then pitching deals, presented 103 proposals my first year, no listings. So learned that the hard way. Listed half a dozen deals, sold none of them. My first 6 listings, didn't sell any of them because I didn't know how to price deals. Learned the hard way. Managing expectations, learned the hard way. And so I really think every technical skill I know, and some of the non-technical ones I learned the hard way. And I just think that, at least for me, that's just how I learn. I'm the guy who's got to touch the stove. My mom could tell me not to do it, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to learn the hard way. But I learn, slow learner, but I learn. But I think almost everything I know I've learned through failure, which is the hard way. All right, a Matthews moment that made you proud. Ratty, I'll start with you, then Dirk, Dave, and I'll finish it off.
Oh, man. Okay, give me a second here. Made me proud. I mean, the whole thing makes me proud, but let's get a little more specific, right? What makes me proud is our resilience, okay? And you got to be battle tested, right? I think we've talked about a lot of the fundamentals of Matthews. Not to repeat any of those. We've talked about our culture, and that's the beginning point of resilience. Our leadership, our founder, that's a point of resilience. And now this startup company started in a decent market, 2015, right? Then all of us, everyone's got a story. It's like 9/11, but the COVID experience. That's a big test for us, right? We were still a very young company, not a tremendous amount of capital. And a lot of things went down. So the way we handled that, the way we came together as a company, And it's been in the last couple of years have been tough in our industry specifically, right? And so that resilience, it's nice to talk about all the things that we've talked about, but to not fire anybody, not to have a reduction in force, not to stop developing technology. We've continued to develop technology. To see our vision through the ups and downs of the business and the industry, that resilience, could not be prouder of that every single day.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Dirk?
Yeah, the first thing I thought of when you asked the question was just immediately the whole COVID situation came to mind as well. You know, really just that we, I feel like took the long view, and everybody says they're going to do that. They say, well, hey, you know, when things get tough, that's the opportunity to go take market share. We're going to go out.
We're going to be greedy when others are
we're going to be
fearful,
greedy
right?
when others are fearful. But then, you know, it hits the fan, and
Next time.
they run. They run too, and they're scared, and they don't do what they say they're going to do in that moment. And so I've been most proud of us, just willing to stay true to our vision, even when it's difficult to do so. You know, we've had lots of great internal dialogue and conversations leading up to and around those. They're like core memories for me. You know, when the NBA was shutting down and the world was stopping in March of 2020, and I'm sitting in the rain in my car because we're having some really difficult conversations, and I didn't want to be in the office. We were all in the Orange County office that day, filming some interviews and things. And, you know, but as we talked about all of our options, we collectively arrived at what I believe was the right decision.
The most insane one.
Yeah.
Keep everybody open. The office is back. Let's go.
Let's roll.
Let's roll.
What was the date on that? Right?
Yeah.
Well,
But-
that was decided in late April, and by May 4th, we were back in the office, which looking back, we nailed it. But
Yeah.
at the time, we were like, oh my God. what
But
are
we did
doing?
it. We did it. We
did
were
it.
greedy when others were fearful, and stayed true to our vision. And that
And
you
coming
know,
out of that
goes with
period, like,
resilience.
whoa,
So it's
you know.
but it's the same thought.
That's a great one, David.
All right, so I'll take a little bit of a different angle, which is what makes me the most proud. It's the moment when I'm intentionally walking out just a little bit late to that welcome party at our awards trip every single year, and I get to see all of the people who are there to celebrate success along with their spouses and significant others. And I get to take in this culmination of a celebration. And we don't often take time to celebrate success. We do in little small moments in the office when we ring the bell for a closing. But the awards trip is a celebration of sustained success for someone, not on an individual deal, but on many deals, on the building of what has been accomplished as we look past, you know, the prior 12 months and of course into the future. And those are always amazing culture building activities for us. Everyone's in a great mood, and I am very proud at those moments to see what that has become. You certainly know from the very first trip to what it is going to be coming up in less than a month. We'll be enjoying in Maui
With
our largest group
160
ever.
people, man.
Yeah, it's going to be, it'll be fantastic. But I know that, you know, when we're there and seeing everyone come through, that's a proud moment for me, but I know that is for all of you as well, and certainly for the agents that are in attendance and the other platform staff as well.
I know that feeling, man. We made that walk once or twice together. We're like, man, look at all these people here, and there's a satisfaction. I'll wrap this up, and it's somewhat similar to that. Is I'm most proud of watching many of them young, but the men and women that have worked here over the years, watching their lives form actually outside this office, and feeling like I and we as a company and I individually had a little itty bitty part to play in providing that young guy or gal an opportunity to create a really incredible life. And I'm proud of Simon Asoff. Like, I remember hiring him out of college, and now, you know, he's married, he's doing great. You know, I'm proud of Fonz, I'm proud of you, man. Alfonso Lamelli sitting behind the camera, like just hit his 10-year anniversary. We're going to go celebrate in Hawaii, watching him, get married, have 2 kids, grow up and be a father. I was with Connor Kearns last night, proud of Connor, hiring him. He was an intern, a little baby face intern. And now, he's doing great, just phenomenal success professionally, married a wonderful gal in Montana. And I was like, hey, you start, when you start a family, he's like, oh, well, all right, and like, just watching these, Chad Kerr is like the OG, man. Watching Chad from when I hired him at 23 to now, beyond success, a most successful agent in Matthews history with 3 beautiful children, wonderful wife Taylor, and like there's so many more examples I can't take all day, but that makes me the most proud. There was a wedding in one of our offices last week, and there were 7 groomsmen. 4 of the groomsmen were Matthews guys they worked with. And I asked the question, did you know them before you started working? He goes, no. So and this has happened a lot at Matthews, is that their relationships are so tight here, and it gets to that culture, right? We talked about it, that they chose for the men to stand beside them as they make the biggest decision, the guys and gals that they work with. And that's what I'm most proud of, is to feel that all my effort, maybe in a little teeny itty bitty way, has positively impacted someone's life outside these walls because of the opportunity we provided them inside these walls. That's what makes me the most proud. We talk about it all the time. But that's it. Anyway, appreciate you guys listening. A once a decade opportunity to have the 4 horsemen up here. So hopefully you enjoyed. We appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully see you soon.